Yes! Season of the Drifter is coming to a close, and Season of Opulence is right around the corner. So I had to let y'all know exactly how I feel about the past couple of months of Destiny 2 before we immerse into the final DLC of the annual pass. This video will be split up into several parts, and I have timestamps listed here. But without further ado, let's get it in. First up, let's talk about Gambit Prime. Alright, so in Season 4, I completed all of the requirements to unlock the Dredging title alongside obtaining all the weapons. So by the time Season 5 went live, I felt very little need to ever play Gambit again. This is most of the reason why I wasn't too excited when Gambit Prime was announced, and I still felt the same way when I played Gambit Prime, or GP as I like to call it, for the first time. I gave it multiple runs to ensure myself that it was possible that this new spin on Gambit could become something that I'd enjoy, but I quickly realized that it was to no avail. None of my friends and clanmates were motivated enough to work on obtaining any of the Gambit Prime armor sets, which placed my team at a huge disadvantage. I eventually stopped trying to enjoy Gambit Prime because I couldn't get accustomed to the new pace, and at first I didn't enjoy the new mechanics. I eventually realized that each match of GP was stressful, and without the right team, it just wasn't fun. It wasn't until about 2 months into Season 6 when I started to actually enjoy Gambit Prime, and I can confidently state that I was only motivated to give it another shot because I really wanted that Reckoner title, and with that goal in mind, alongside how hard I eventually started working on the Gambit Prime armor sets, I began to enjoy GP a lot. I found myself going on very long GP binges until everybody on my fire team eventually had to leave, and the derivative of that was the day and night difference between GP with the armor and GP without the armor. I enjoyed draining motes from the enemy bank, sending giant blockers to the enemy side of the field, and the whole 9 yards, and it was almost impossible to believe that I disliked this game type at one point in time. Accompanying this, I found it difficult to return to and enjoy regular Gambit because I had gotten so accustomed to the single round matches of Gambit Prime and the overall speed and difficulty of this game type, and the new mechanics that the Gambit Prime armor sets added. Season of the Drifter also brought us private matches for Gambit Prime and Gambit, which is cool, I guess. I mean, it's not something I'll ever be doing, but I suppose it's a good thing for people who'd actually want to play Gambit with their friends instead of matchmaking. Alright, now let's talk about the weapons. One thing that was done right in Season of the Drifter were the weapons. Not only do these weapons look amazing, they're also incredibly powerful and were the first weapons in Destiny 2 to debut with perks newly introduced in Season 6. In Season of the Drifter, we were given amazing perks like Swashbuckler, Firing Line, and Multi-Kill Clip, and these perks can only roll on the Gambit Prime weapons. I also really like how 4 of the Gambit Prime weapons curated versions have a very specific way that they can be attained, which was great because that's another layer of RNG removed when factoring in the drop rate of a curated role weapon. The curated role versions of these weapons aren't guaranteed drops, but performing the following tasks will eventually drop one in game for you. For the curated bug out bag SMG, you will have a chance at dropping this after rapidly killing ads. The curated spare rations hand cannon can drop from collecting motes. The curated last man standing shotgun can drop from killing blockers, and the curated soul survivor sniper rifle has a chance of dropping from obtaining Army of 1 medals. Again, these curated weapons only have a chance at dropping from performing these tasks in Gambit Prime. The fact that some of these weapons have a purposeful drop prerequisite is one of the most opportunistic things that Bungie has ever done in Destiny 2. These weapons also can drop from the Reckoning game mode, but rotate every week depending on which boss is available in the Reckoning. I'll go ahead and discuss my thoughts on the Reckoning right now. The Reckoning is only used for obtaining the Gambit Prime armor sets and also serves as another method of obtaining Gambit Prime weapons. So to put it bluntly, if neither one of these are any interest to you, Reckoning will be a literal waste of your time, and I'm 100% serious when I say this. Of course, Reckoning can be a decently enjoyable activity with a full fire team, but with that in mind, I would never suggest solo queuing into this activity. Before I played Reckoning, I assumed that it was going to be Destiny 2's version of Horde mode, and to some extent it is. Your job is to kill as quickly as possible to increase the percentage of dominance, which is located in the top left-hand corner. Prioritize big yellow bar enemies because they'll give you the most progress. There are 2 attributes about the Reckoning that I really like. Similarly to Strikes, the Reckoning has modifiers. The Elemental Singe modifier rotates every week, while the other 2 rotate every day. That's pretty cool and all, but I also love the fact that you can also use raid banners before each encounter in the Reckoning. This gave me hope that Bungie will continue to implement the usage of raid banners outside of raids and for other future PvE activities. Who knows? We might even see raid banners being used in the new 6-person activity being introduced to Season of Opulence, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Now back to it. Your main goal in the Reckoning is to use the various Gambit Prime scents that you've collected, turn them into motes corresponding to the 4 different armor sets, and receive a piece of Gambit Prime armor upon completion of a Reckoning encounter. Reckoning is divided into tiers 1, 2, and 3, and if you take the time to upgrade your synthesizer every week, you will attain Notorious Gambit Prime armor after completing tier 3 runs. And now that I say this, it always makes me realize how pointless the non-Notorious armor sets are. Tier 1 Reckoning completion invitations will get you illicit gear, whereas outlaw gear comes from tier 2 reckoning. But after you obtain the notorious armor, the other armor sets become insignificant, especially when you consider the fact that only notorious armor can unlock all the Gambit Prime perks for each particular set. Also, the notorious gear can roll with enhanced perks. So once you've obtained the notorious armor, everything else below just becomes wasted vault space. There's probably a million different routes Bungie could have taken to avoid something like this, and I have a very interesting proposal. It would have been great if Season of the Drifter introduced a new spin on ornaments exclusive to the Gambit Prime armor. What if these ornaments were created from motes just like the Gambit Prime armor pieces were, but they'd only be compatible with Gambit's Ancient Apocalypse armor set, and when these ornaments are equipped, the armor pieces would not only change appearance, but they get the various armor perks, and you would be able to upgrade each ornament by completing the higher tiers of Gambit Prime. Not only would this save you a ton of vault space, you'll be able to equip the ornaments on the fly, as opposed to having an entire armor set dedicated to one role. Now in tier 1 of Reckoning, once you killed enough enemies to reach 100% dominance, a boss will appear, and killing it will conclude the encounter. But in tiers 2 or 3, you have to complete an encounter known as the Bridge of Folly, which requires you and your fire team to sit idly inside of a ring until it hits 100%, then you move on to the next one until you've done this 5 or 6 times. Now you would think that something like this wouldn't be that bad, but when you factor in the endless hordes of enemies trying to kill you, the Bridge of Folly can become incredibly hectic and stressful. To make matters worse, there are snipers on the outer boundaries of the map, as well as several ultra-level boss enemies, and if you don't kill these mini bosses, you're pretty much guaranteed to fail this entire encounter, because just like all bosses in Destiny, they stomp, slam, punch the ground, or something capable of sending you flying into oblivion. Since you only have 30 seconds to sit at each capture point and fill the progress meter to 100%, you will commonly get knocked out of the rings by the boss stump attack if you don't kill them before they have the opportunity to reach you. And if you don't have at least one Well of Radiance and a tether, the Bridge of Folly becomes even more difficult. Now if you manage to complete the Bridge of Folly encounter, you'll fight 1 or 2 different bosses, and they rotate each week. One week the final boss will be the Lightness of Oryx, and the next week will be 2 Hive Knight champions. Neither one of these bosses are incredibly difficult, but I literally avoid Reckoning like the plague if the Blackout modifier is on at any time that the Hive Knight champions are the bosses for the week. Blackout makes this boss fight nearly impossible, because if you're in the general area, yes, the general area of their Axe Slam attack, you'll die 99% of the time, and believe me when I say that there have been times where I was about 20 feet in the air and still died from this. It'll never make sense to me. So whenever the combination of Blackout and the Hive Knight champions is a thing for the week, it's always gonna make Reckoning a no-go for me. Some time ago, Glass was also a modifier for Reckoning, but was eventually removed due to how anti-fun it made all of Reckoning, so it wouldn't surprise me if Blackout found his way out of here as well. I personally find it disappointing that the Reckoning only has 2 different bosses to go against. I don't see how difficult it would have been for there to be at least 2 more bosses added to mix things up a bit. It's already bad enough that there aren't many reasons to play Reckoning, and the fact that there are only 2 bosses gives me even less incentive to play it. For a game mode like this, you'd think that there'd be more intentionality in the form of bounties or something, but I suppose that Bungie was too fixated on this being the sole method of obtaining Gambit Prime armor, they left a lot of stones unturned. Alright, next up, we're going to talk about Invitations of the Nine. And when Bungie first released the roadmap for the entire annual pass, we were informed that there'd be something known as Xur bounties that would be introduced in Season of the Drifter. At that exact moment, the entire Destiny 2 player base began to speculate what exactly Xur bounties would be. The most frequently heard speculation was that Xur bounties would have something to do with exotic weapons and armor, since Xur is the only vendor in the game to sell exotic loot. Sometime later, Bungie released an updated version of the annual pass roadmap, and what was originally known as Xur bounties was changed to Invitations of the Nine. This name change confused many, but the speculation grew even more as the Destiny player base began to wonder what the Invitations of the Nine would entail. Before we were given access to the Invitations of the Nine, we were informed that Xur would give us a new invitation every Friday for 9 weeks. At first, I thought that the Invitations to the Nine was a pretty cool concept, considering that the first invitation showed us a cutscene entailing a conversation between a drifter and a hunter that was apparently from the shadows of yore. The drifter is one of the most mysterious characters in Destiny 2, and I've always wanted to know more about him, so I assured myself that I'd complete the invitations every week to see what would happen. Over the course of 9 weeks, we ended up finding out some very interesting information about the emissary of the Nine, as well as some key details of the drifter's past. As much as I look forward to completing these invitations every week, I have to be honest when I say that I had zero enjoyment performing the tasks necessary to complete them, and I'll explain why momentarily. So basically, each invitation required you to complete a particular strike and kill different types of enemies, and upon death they had a chance to drop an item known as a sample, which is always respective to each individual enemy faction. For example, the very first invitation to the Nine requires you to complete the Savathun Song Strike and collect 9 samples from Hive and Fallen. Now I stated that I didn't enjoy performing the tasks required to complete the invitations to the Nine 9, and that's simply because doing so was never enjoyable. What annoyed me the most was the drop rate of the defeated enemy samples. There was literally no consistency of their drop rate because there'd be times where you'd kill hordes of a particular type of enemy and not get a single sample, whereas you could kill 2 or 3 and get 1 sample per enemy killed. It made zero sense. It became even more tedious when you complete an activity to get 1 or 2 samples, which would require you to run that activity again. There was a point in time where one of the invitations of the 9 was glitched because it required you to kill Vex on the Tangle Shore, but since Vex don't appear on the Tangle Shore, it was impossible to complete it until it was fixed. Eventually, we were able to complete this by killing Vex and the Warden of Nothing Strike, and at this point in time, the inconsistent drop rate of the samples was made even more apparent because it took me 3 entire runs of the Warden of Nothing Strike to obtain all 9 Vex samples to complete that particular invitation. Not only was this repetitive and tedious, it was frustrating dealing with the realization that I'm doing entirely more than what should be necessary for the completion of this task, especially when you think about how disappointing the end reward for every invitation of the 9 is. Yep, when you complete an invitation of 9, you go to the Reckoning, you see a quick cutscene, a chest spawns, you get a powerful reward, but it's always something from the general loop. Anything that comes from a legendary engram is what you have a chance of getting from the chest at the end of each invitation. Nope, there's some regular legendary gear that can easily drop from anywhere else in the game. I think what bugged me the most about this is the fact that these invitations were such a chore to complete, and the realization that Bungie didn't even have the decency and consideration to reward us with something even semi-unique. To make matters worse, you'd only have until the following Thursday to complete each invitation, and if you didn't, you would be an entire week behind, and you would have to wait until the next Xur visit to pick up the most recent invitation. That's because Bungie had the bright idea to not make the most recent invitation available to be picked up if you completed one by the time Xur visited. This ended up happening to me once, and I was an entire week behind everybody else because my invitation randomly disappeared from my inventory, and I didn't realize it until it was time to pick up a new invitation the following week. This is when I found out that I'd have to recomplete last week's invitation, and if it wasn't for the completionist in me, I would have stopped doing the invitations to the 9 as a whole. And with that in mind, I believe that this entire concept was a poor approach to giving us something to do. The invitations to the 9 felt like busy work, something that existed only to keep us occupied, and if it weren't for the lore, I highly doubt that anybody else would have bothered with these as well. To conclude this review, I really did not like Season of the Drifter despite some of the affinities I stated I had for it. Despite the fact that each season in the annual pass was confirmed to last about 3 months or so, there was so little to do in Season of the Drifter, I ended up doing everything that this DLC had to offer within the first week or so. The Reckoning, Gambit Prime, Gambit private matches, and the invitations of the 9 was literally all we were given in this season. No raid, no strikes, no PvP maps, none of that. And at the point in time that this video was going live, everybody is aware that Season of Opulence is getting a raid, which makes things even worse for Season of the Drifter. If you are not an avid Gambit player, chances are you also hated Season of the Drifter, and I can confidently say that this season will probably go down in history as the worst of the 3 annual pass DLCs. I honestly could have taken a break from Destiny 2 for the entirety of this season and not feel as if I missed out on anything. But yeah, that does it for this one, everybody. As I said before, I didn't enjoy Season of the Drifter, and I hope that we never have to deal with anything this disappointing again. If you enjoyed my review of Season of the Drifter and made it to the end, do me a favor and drop a like. And if you're new to my neck of the woods, click that subscribe button to stay in tune for more elite gaming content. And with that being stated, 1LHD is over and out. Y'all take it easy.
I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.